The safety of residents is our primary focus, and planning efforts are in place to open shelters for local residents should the need arise. Basically what we're saying is we're not going to turn anybody away. However, at this time the shelters are open primarily for folks that are evacuating from the coast because they're the ones that are going to need sheltering. That being said, everyone in Charlotte, once we get the shelters open, is more than welcome to go to any shelter. These shelters are at East Mecklenburg High School, open at 8 a.m. North Mecklenburg and Olympic Schools will open today at 12 p.m. Audrey Kell High School will open at 4 p.m. We have tremendous collaboration with all of our sheltering partners. There's a sheltering task force that meets once a month that's made up of almost 40 individuals from across the community. The last few days they've been meeting on a daily basis to make sure we are meeting the needs of Charlotte Mecklenburg. That's it.
Appreciate you, Chief. I'm going to bring up Joe Penner. He's our Director of Medic.
Thanks, Rob. A few thoughts first about Medic, as you would expect. Medic and our other emergency responders here in the community, we plan for these kinds of events, the kinds of things that are likely to happen. We test for them year-round. What I'm here today to say, importantly, is that I want you to know the organizations are agile, they adapt, and conditions will change. Just think about the forecast the last 48 hours. We don't know what the forecast will be 2 days from now, but we know we'll have a forecast today. We will take action based on that, and we will take action Saturday, Friday, tomorrow night, every day. So we can't see to the end, but we can see what we see today, and I can assure you our organizations have been training for these kinds of events for a long time. Planned and prepared. Second thing I'd like to say about our organizations is that each gets pulled in different directions, but we are retaining capacity here in Charlotte to take care of whatever comes our way. Medic does have some resources, a strike team and a bus on the East Coast. We've evacuated a nursing home in Jacksonville, I believe, and are awaiting other mission assignments today. Medic does have some resources, a strike team. And I'd also like to reiterate some of the comments. I don't know that you need the specifics. You've heard the website address, so please get that right and get it out to your public, our public. But what I need to ask you to do with that is to get them to look at it. We just rattled off a lot of resources, and that's great. I need people to do what those resources suggest be done. I need you to look at your medications. I need you to check in on your neighbors. I need you to be a neighbor. Where this goes, we don't know. Right now, we're taking the threat very seriously. Finally, I want to tell you how prepared Medic is at our new location. We're extremely grateful for the community's investment in preparedness and security. We take that seriously. Our staffing is prepared. We scale up as needed, and we're extremely strong going into this storm. We have 3 weeks of fuel supply on hand to power the backup generators that back up the backup generators. There's a lot of redundant systems in place. So to close, our teams are prepared, and we are working well together. Thank you.
Please, Chief Kirkputney.
Good morning. Very briefly, a couple of things I want you to know. One is preparation. The other is collaboration. As a community, we need to have our families prepared. You've heard repeatedly, be ready to sustain yourself for at least 3 days. Be prepared with your necessities, food, water, fuel. This is the time to get all those preparations made. Collaboration. I just want the community to know that we on the local, state, and federal level plan for this. Now it's time to execute that plan. I just want you as a community to know you're in good hands. We're working together seamlessly, and we're going to continue to communicate. The only thing I ask is use 911 for emergency situations. We will have 311 operational, and we will, through the weekend, have a non-emergency number that you can call. Again, let's be safe. We'll get through this together.
Questions for any of the chiefs? Chief Director?
Yes. I heard reports that Orange County, Florida, fire rescue is coming up, along with other agencies in Florida.
We do have 2 swiftwater teams and our own.
Creeks, etc. Can you talk a little bit about whether everyone should be on guard for flooding or just in those areas?
I wouldn't be able to say specifically that. I'd have to leave that to the forecasters as well as maybe our GIS personnel to kind of outline where the floods could be. Just remember that the other day they were talking about record rain here in the state. So I would anticipate we may see flooding in areas that we don't normally anticipate flooding. So I would say everyone should be prepared for that.
Chief, how does the swiftwater team train for that, for rescues that may happen in streets and neighborhoods that you're not used to performing in?
We train regularly with that. I believe we have the whitewater facility here that we train there as well. So we do a lot of training to prepare for this. Boat operations, we have lakes here as well to kind of facilitate that.
For those that are homeless in some of the low-lying areas, some of the flooded areas, I mean, what is going to be done to make sure that they are safe and everything to get them to some of these shelters?
We are still working to communicate with those that don't necessarily have access to the internet and those things. We've been in constant communication with some of the shelters to make sure that their capacity will be able to be increased to assist with that.
And for the shelters that are going to be open, are they going to be just for everyone? Are they going to be divided into families, men and women, anything like that?
I'm going to have to allow Chief Graham to answer that as far as the specifics is concerned, or maybe even American Red Cross.
Yeah, so what was say the question one more time?
Are the shelters that you guys are opening up, are they going to be divided at all for families in one section, men and women, anything like that?
That's up to the American Red Cross, and then each shelter has a sheltering manager that will work with that. CMPD is at every one of those shelters for security, so we have an entire group of folks who are working on that piece. This is not the first time that we've opened a shelter. It's fairly a normal operation for us for different events or incidents. However, we're opening more this time than we normally would. And so on top of the local stuff that's going on, we're also in coordination with North Carolina Emergency Management and the State Emergency Operations Center. So it's a larger organization that's working on that piece. The Emergency Operations Center that's open at the Fire Academy, one of the goals of that is to bring all the different representatives together so that everybody can just walk across the room and get those answers to questions just like that. That's a wonderful thing and a wonderful asset that we started yesterday.
And just once more, if you could go, Chief Putney, if you could go into what security measures will be at some of these shelters and everything to protect the people that have to come in here.
Absolutely. It's a later approach. We'll have officers very visible. We're connecting with the staff so that if anything starts to go awry, they'll notify us as well. We will have personnel at every one of the locations as a proactive measure to be very visible, but also adequate resources based on our staffing level to respond beyond, if it goes beyond that.
Chief, what's the staffing level?
You know, I will never tell you specific numbers, but what I'll tell you is half of our sworn staff will be working days and half nights when we activate, and that gives us more than adequate coverage. The other piece of that, though, is we make sure we have, from our supportive units, investigations and support services, we pull sworn staff as well. So we'll be heavily staffed, and about 50% of our sworn capability will work nights and the other work day shifts.
What advice can you give motorists? You had the 2 water rescues last night in Town. What can you tell motorists if they're stranded in their car? What happened last night?
The phrase "turn around, don't drown" is true. If you see any type of standing water or moving water, do not drive into the standing water or moving water. You don't know if the road has been washed away. You have no clue. And I know that occurred last evening. I could just say that if you don't drive into that water, then we don't have to come and rescue you. So the key here is make sure that you obey the turn around, don't drown.
Chief, strict.
Obviously, there's a huge number of people in this community who do not speak English. How are you going to get that message?
It's my understanding that we have provided that information in Spanish from Telemundo, right? Yes. So Telemundo has that information. We've been able to provide that in Spanish as well.
So, streets like Woodlawn, South Boulevard, parts of Tryon have been prone to flooding. Is there anything proactively you guys can do with the expected rain coming, or is this just kind of a wait and see type of deal?
As I said, we've collaborated with other city departments, so I know that the other departments are out there clearing drains and doing that type of activity. I don't want to speak for those departments specifically, but I know that a lot of work has been done over the past 2 days to prepare for this rain.
How important going along with that is it for, residents to also help with some of those clearing efforts on their own property or right at the edge of their own property?
Yes, I think it's very important that you make sure your gutters are clear, that your drains are clear, so that you don't have flooding on your personal property, you don't have any roof damage, things of that nature. So yes, even the residents can assist with that.
Do you know what the occupancy is do you know what the occupancy is roughly of the shelters that are open?
Do we have a number to provide?
The number will change as we go through the emergency. Based on those numbers will change as we go through the emergency. So we've identified tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 facilities for that. So basically how it works is today we have a certain amount of square footage that we would allocate for that. As we get deeper into it, that number actually comes down, and it's based on FEMA guidelines. So those numbers are a little bit fluid, and we would not want to say this is the maximum amount of number we would want to put into a shelter. Our goal and our job is always to get to yes, right? So that's been communicated to the Emergency Operations Center. We always want to try to do everything we can to get to yes and not say no to folks that are in need.
I know that you said that there are going to be 5 shelters open, but if those do for some reason get to the point that they seem to be at capacity, will there be a potential to open up more shelters?
Yes, we have tier 2 and tier 3 shelters. Now one thing that's important, I just got off the phone with North Carolina Emergency Management a few minutes ago. So our shelters right now are overflow shelters. The state of North Carolina is doing everything they can to keep people sheltered as close to their residence as possible, because after the storm is over, what always happens is folks want to get back home, right? And so we want them to get back home. The second part of that is the state has identified additional shelters that they will use as secondary overflow. And then our shelters and all the other counties around us are also opening shelters will be used in addition to that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Chief, can you talk about your experience with hurricanes?
So my experience with hurricanes? Yeah, so I've been on North Carolina Emergency Management's incident management team for almost 20 years. And my experience with disasters as a whole is I've deployed to Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Irene in Hyde County, Hurricane Arthur out on Ocracoke, Hurricane Matthew, I was in Carteret County, and then Lenoir County. And each one of those deployments was usually for up to 2 weeks. I also worked as demobilization unit leader for the BP oil spill down in Louisiana. And then most recently, back in May, I was the planning section chief for the Mount Kilauea eruption in Hawaii. No, the common theme is communication. So every disaster is different, and we have to look at those disasters and say, okay, this is where we think it's going to go, but just as you guys look in the weather forecast, that changes every 4 hours, right? So we have to be flexible, but then communication is always the key. The message that we are sending out is that actually accepting people understand it, and then are we getting the message back? So when one of the goals of the Emergency Operations Center is to get everybody to communicate and get them in one room so we can do that. So we have policy decision makers, which are our senior leadership and elected folks at the city and county levels. And then you have key decision makers, which are the gentlemen behind me who give direction to our agencies, and then we move forward with that.
Chief, with all the construction uptown, are you concerned about any cranes or how much wind can they withstand?
So that at this time today, the winds do not appear to be an issue, but we're making sure that all that is taken care of. That is subject to change, as it always is, and we just talked about that. So that is something that we're going to keep an eye on as we move through the storm.
For Charlotte's homeless residents, should their first try for shelter be the regular shelters, the men's shelter, or should they be going straight to Red Cross shelters?
No, Red Cross shelters. But let me make sure I get this message out. Your first thing you should do is always try to communicate with your neighbors and your family and other folks, right? So you want to look for other things that are not reliant upon the government. The government has to be the last step in that process, and that's consistent with FEMA's message, right? So when we talk about having to take care of yourselves for 72 hours, that's important. There are almost 1.2 million people in Mecklenburg County, roughly, and those numbers are always changing. To put that in perspective, that's about twice the population of the state of Vermont. So we have our challenges ahead of us, but we're always working toward securing a brighter future. Anything else?
I think we're good. I heard some talk of Telemundo. I'm not sure I saw any representatives from Telemundo here. We do have Spanish-speaking firefighters who can talk emergency management and preparedness. For anybody interested, I could bring Carlos Rodriguez up to the lectern. I know we have some members of our Spanish-speaking community here from the media. Anyone interested in having this? Yes? Carlos, would you mind, sir?
Buenos días. ¿Pregunta?
Bueno, esta mañana estuvimos en la radio, Carlos. Una de las cosas que la comunidad tiene temor es que mucha gente necesita una identificación para ir a un shelter o llamar a la policía. Todas esas cosas son las que conciernen un poco al momento de una emergencia.
No, nomás que toca el número 911 y viene la policía, los bomberos, lo que sea, lo que te falta. Si tú llamas 911, emergencia, tú vas a coger el grupo que te falta.
Anybody else? Any questions for Medic? In the Spanish-speaking media, we've got a representative from Medic as well who speaks Spanish for any questions concerning Medic and how they should be
Chief from Medic, what are you guys doing in terms of residents in Mecklenburg County that are assisted living, nursing homes? Are they sheltering in place?
Yes, they are. There's unless indications show that we need to remove them and relocate them, they're safest where they're at.
We appreciate it.
Lester is here if there's
Anybody interested in speaking with Medic? Someone from the Spanish-speaking media will make him available afterwards. Olivia Lester, and we've got Mayor Pro Tem Isolt and Councilmember Winston available for one-offs, as well as Willie Ratch for community relations. So we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.